Right. Well, welcome to this conversation about leadership and leadership roles and all of the issues around that today. By way of introduction, I'm Jamie. I'm the Executive Chairman of Technology Transformation Specialist C Learning. I get to spend my time working with extraordinary people who are doing remarkable things and doing work that matters. So I've never really thought of it as a job. It's more of just a privilege what I get to do. I'm going to introduce our special guest today in a moment. And I'm very, very privileged that she's joining us today. She's a good friend of mine, actually, on a personal level, going back many years. And she does incredible work that I think is going to be of real interest to anybody who's got any aspirations to be a leader of any kind, actually. But we'll be talking about education and colleges quite a bit, I suspect. But before I get into all of that, Chris, my co-host and partner in crime, why don't you introduce yourself, my friend?
Co-host, I'm looking for a promotion at some point. It will be my show eventually. Yeah, I'm the Product Solutions Manager for C Learning. So basically, anything that makes people's lives simpler and easier through technology or, just connections with our wider community. It's great to be on the call with Suzanne today. It's the first time we've met, so fascinating to learn a little bit more about your good self. Very pleased to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And I'm going to big him up a little bit here as well, because he always undersells himself a little bit. But Chris joined, Chris is a long-term friend of mine, but joined my crew some years ago, never having worked in technology before. And now he's not only the #1 salesperson for Google in terms of what he does in this country, but he manages millions of pounds worth of software for our business and has the highest customer retention of anyone I've ever met in the software industry. So pretty much everybody loves you, Chris. What can I say?
Well, it makes me wonder sometimes, Jim, when you say that, whether you think about that statement at night and go, my God, what am I doing? Chris is looking after all that software.
Absolutely not. You do a stellar job, but I think it's because we're all about people at the end of the day. And speaking of which, I'm going to introduce an extraordinary person who I'm very proud to call a friend, Suzanne Thurlow. And I first met you, Suzanne. I was thinking about this before we started this today. I was thinking about when we first met and I got to know you. Because Suzanne, for the benefit of anybody watching or listening to this later, Suzanne and me first met when Suzanne was actually involved in recruiting me to a very senior role in the college sector some years ago. And as part of that process, one of the things I'll never forget, Suzanne, was you did like a personality assessment, if I remember correctly, of me as well as everybody else. I still got the job. And you did a personality, yeah. And the thing I'll never forget, and maybe we'll dig into a bit of this randomly through this conversation today, but the thing I'll never forget was you took me outside into the beautiful grounds of the college that we were working at. And you sat me down, and I was thinking, I'm not quite sure what this feedback's going to be about. Yeah, where's this going? Is it going to be like, I'm really sorry to tell you? And I don't know what I expected that conversation to start like, but it definitely wasn't how you started it, which was you basically said something along the lines of, or at least this is what my memory tells me, have you ever had sort of a near-death type experience? And I looked at you completely confused because however I thought that conversation was going to start, it wasn't going to be like that. And I said, no, why are you asking? And then you explained a little bit about, well, in your profile, you've got some quite unusual spikes, one of which is motivational spikes. And you should have warned my chief executive at the time, Suzanne, and said, look, this guy's going to be like working with Tigger. But I found that whole process fascinating. And it kind of segues into my first conversation point, really, that I want to talk to you about, because I would be really interested in your thoughts on thinking about board positions and leaders today. And you're involved in appointing some really, really senior roles right across colleges all over the country. And you've got, unrivaled experience and success in that from anybody that I've met anyway. What do you think are the essential qualities? I know it's a bit of an abstract term, that, and I know it's much more complex than I'm implying with this overly simple question. But just as a few instinctive thoughts that come to mind, when you're placing people into really senior positions, which typically might be chief executive or equivalent, what are the really non-negotiable essential qualities that you think, well, that's essential, or even a red flag of, well, that's a bit of a problem? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've got lots of thoughts, really, and it's where I hone it into a few key points that I have observed over the many years of my experience. So in context, I've stopped counting after 30 plus years of what I've been doing. And what I've been doing has been around people leadership for all of that career. And I've picked up a few observations and experiences, of course, along the way. But if you were to ask me on the here and the now, given that I work with boards and CEOs around very senior positions, there are some common themes that come through. So I'm going to start with probably quite a basic one, but it is important, and that's about credentials. You know, someone's got to have, as a deal breaker, a really credible background. And that's really important, because if you think about the risk people take when you appoint people, you've got to get it right. It's easy to get it wrong, but they've got to have a starting point, which is they've got the background, they've got the track record of success. They've been there, they've done that, and they've actually bring some stuff with them in terms of success. So I'm going to put that as number one. Beyond that, and actually the way in which things have evolved with senior leadership appointments, it's going in a good direction. It's going around visionary leadership. And what I have come to learn is that that's up for interpretation as to what visionary leadership is by individual and by institution. So that gives great license for recruiters working with their clients and their candidates to explore the degree to which someone brings visionary leadership. And that can be limiting or it can be extensive. And there's something really important about if you think about this as a marriage, as a partnership, it's got to be a visionary leadership that actually fits well to the complexion and the environment of the organisation for which they're interested. So now we start to get really quite interested dynamics about trying to understand where a college is at, where an organisation's at, and what they actually need and look for in this credible visionary leader that they're considering. But there's two other things I would throw in, and these now are absolute deal breakers, and we are frequently asked to look for them. And I understand them because I've worked this sector for those years. It's resilience. We need resilient leaders. And we also need leaders that have got the ability, there's a little bit of a play on emotional intelligence in this next one, around people who can win the hearts and minds of the people for whom they will be of influence. So I'd probably give you 5 things there, but as deal breakers, they are pretty common, and they are the ones for which our clients, our appointing panels look at with degrees of dynamics around it. So there's my starting point on non-negotiable qualities. There's a raft of other things, but I'm going to suggest that it's become less about the technical competent ability to do the job, and it's more about the visionary application and fit for which they will also bring.
That is an awesome answer, and that was such a powerful answer. I was listening to you, Suzanne, thinking we should put this one behind a paywall, Chris. So anybody who wants to watch this one, because the advice that Suzanne's just given will put people in jobs if they get it right. That was just awesome.
Good start there.
Yeah, you're off to a great start. It's my question. It got off to a great start. So, Chris, let's see how you do. No pressure, my friend. But I'm going to hand over to you now.
Oh yeah, so my question will be something like, what's your favourite colour? It won't. It's a bit more in depth than that, but yeah, that's great to hear. I actually doubted myself before I joined C Learning, because I went to college, I didn't go to university, wasn't from a tech background, but Jamie said what you bring is something that maybe, can't be taught, in that your ability to communicate, get on with people, reach out, build those relationships. So I was really pleased to take on that role, and not let you down too much.
Yeah, not only have you not let anyone down, I mean, your list of accolades is extensive. You play it down a bit, but you've built up a multi-million-pound software business through being the kind of people that others want to work with, and it inspires trust. And as for resiliency, oh my gosh, yes, you certainly got that in spades.
Being genuine and honest, I think. So just moving on from that a little bit, Suzanne, but it kind of segues into it. The trends that you might have seen over the last few years for educators looking to maybe take on head teachers or executive leaders, are there any big changes that have come in the last sort of 5 or 10 years? Obviously, you've underlined there the key qualities that you're looking for. Is there anything else that sort of needs to be included when you're looking for a senior role?
Oh yeah, there's been huge shifts. Year on year, I would say I've seen shifts around what people used to look for, what they currently look for, and actually how they look for them has changed massively as well. We're much better at how we go about assessing somebody's abilities, capabilities, aptitude, motivation, appetite for what they're considering, etc. But there's a couple of things I would probably pin down. We've definitely gone more to the landscape and the sector, and understanding the skills needs has become more important, and rightfully so. So for future leaders, certainly in this educational space, they need to have a strong understanding about the landscape and the kind of emerging national government policy, funding, you name it. Employers now are key, more key than they used to be, and that's a significant shift. That's changed the ways in which we see stakeholders and employer engagements and partnerships. So that's significantly changed likewise. There's a huge piece around, to some degree it's language, to some degrees it's behaviours, where we used to look for the technically competent, able person from a sort of operational lens. We now look for the creativity, the innovation, the visionary piece. That's much stronger. But what I really like about the way in which the sector has probably aligned itself is we've become much more of a values and behaviours sector. So people look for an alignment around the behaviours, the culture, the values for which, and that plays out and pans out beautifully in leadership styles. So there's more emphasis around, and again, emotional intelligence comes back into this one, around someone's authentic leadership abilities and their degree to which they can understand their own and the people around them, their motivators, their drivers, what makes people work at their best. And so the lens has changed massively. And I'll end with a lovely phrase, which I think says what it does on the tin, which is we have become a sector that has put employer-led at the heart place, along with and parallel and equal to the student experience. So student-centric, employer-led, these are massive changes in our language and characteristics and behaviours around what we do in and outside of the organisation.
We're on a roll. That was another outstanding answer. And my colleagues who are going to turn this into a bit of a thought leadership article afterwards are going to just love your first two answers there, because you've come out with such a clarity of insight of really powerful things that you'd only get from the kind of experience that you've got, Suzanne, that I think is going to be so interesting to anybody who is starting off their career or has aspirations to get to very, very senior roles in the education sector. That was fascinating, and you're making me think about so many things actually when you're talking. So it's back to me now, and my discussion point, which I'll come on to, is more about, you sort of started to touch upon it there, really, about what kind of signals you look for in candidates that would make them really stand out and be remarkable. And I'll just share a little anecdote before you answer. One of our great partners in America was sharing with me recently that he advertised this really good job with his company in California. And he had something like about 60 applicants, let's say. And he suddenly noticed something really strange about 50 of the 60 applicants, which was in their application form. About 50 of them had an identical paragraph. And I don't just mean similar. I mean word for word identical.
I know where this is going.
You know where this is going, don't you? And basically they'd all gone, let's chat GPT it. And funnily enough, chat GPT had done an equally great job. And he said it created this really slightly farcical situation that had so many issues that we could dig into. Maybe we won't do it today, but so many issues around, well, they were all really great applications and really compliant because AI had done them, you know. But so I don't know whether that's going to be part of your answer or not, but thinking about what makes candidates stand out and what might make them a little bit remarkable to you as someone who sees so many top level people competing for top level jobs. Well, got any thoughts on that in terms of what would make somebody stand out in terms of substance and being a bit remarkable compared to the wider competitive field?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's some really key things that I look for, and I know likewise clients do too. And I want to come back to the AI bit in a minute, but let me go to your question first. I'm going to use this word on purpose because I rarely find it, and I often have to support and coach people how to try and get it. And it's about having a compelling strategic vision and a compelling narrative about their leadership style. Now, it's the compelling is the word, because if you can be compelling about your subject matter and about your profession, it's very persuasive, it's very attractive, it's very intelligent, it's very it stand out. But it's not something I think people naturally think about having. So I do a lot of coach support with future leaders, senior leaders, people wanting to become that CEO, and I work with them on developing their compelling narrative. So they've got the experience, but you need to refine that into something as an articulation of what it is that you have done, that you bring, that you can do for an organization. So that's my starting point. The other thing I would say, and we've got quite good at this likewise, is there's a shift from where the effective and persuasive senior leaders that stand out for me have gone from not describing the experiences and the responsibilities that they've had, because that's a kind of given, but it's where they shift it and turn it into impactful statements of things that they've done. So where we can see evidenced, impactful actions and approaches that have led to key metrics, improvements, learner outcomes, you name it, what you will. That's where it's persuasive. So a shift from I am responsible for, I bring, I do, to my leadership has led to. So being impactful. A reflective leader. So again, emotional intelligence coming through. That is very persuasive if someone's actually self-aware, reflective, and not shy about recognizing where they've done things great, where they've got things wrong, and where they've learned from, and where they've got gaps. There's no harm in actually recognizing that you're not a finished article, and that the more self-aware people are the ones which they're more convincing because they're recognizing they're not the finished article. The ones for which they get it wrong at assessment center approach is where they come assuming that they've got to persuade somebody they can do anything and everything and all of it, when actually no, we just want to know that you've either got the potential with the credibility and the vision and an understanding of the landscape, and put all that together and you're probably likely to succeed. So that stands out. But there's two other things, and these are added values. So the ones for whom are well connected externally are now standing out. And add that in another way, if they can bring a network with them, they're bringing benefits to the organization they might be joining. So we often get clients asking for candidates that can bring a professional network with them. And they can only do that if they're well connected. So if you want to add to the other things for which successful leaders need to be doing, it's being well connected on that external platform.
That's awesome. I was making some notes there. So compelling, impactful, and emotional intelligence were three standout sort of themes amongst your answer there, what you were talking about.
I think so.
Yeah, I'm absolutely fascinating. I'm blown away by that. Chris, I'm going to hand it back to you, my friend.
Yeah, I like the idea of seeing the potential as well without, having the finished article. There's always room to grow and learn, isn't there? So, that's great to hear too. So just flipping the perspective a little bit, in terms of great candidates, what do you think they're looking for before they say, yes, I'm on board? Is there a particular sort of thing that sort of shines and resonates through with this, or is it different based on the role that somebody might be applying for?
Well, it's a fundamental factor in the consideration of making an invested application. So what people consider is, I'm going to go back to the complexion of the organisation, and I'll give you an example of that. Let's take a college. Is it a college that's in a turnaround situation because there requires improvement and they need a turnaround? Now, some people are highly motivated and bring track record of actually turning an organisation around to get them back to Ofsted good and head towards outstanding. Whereas other candidates might be more motivated by the college that's already at a high level of being recognised by grade. And actually, they just want to become and be part of something to add their value to around future growth, future direction, etc. So complexion of where an organisation is key. But there's also something about a candidate understanding the genuine potential of strategic autonomy in the organisation they are considering. And this is where you can only get close to this as you actually expose the candidate and the client together to get a sense of board philosophy, board direction, exec direction, and are they genuinely presenting an opportunity for someone to have strategic autonomy or strategic influence. And that can be a switch off for candidates if they get a sense that actually there's probably a limitation. And add to that, this is where we get close to a little bit of a feel of culture. And this can go through candidate experience of when they're actually meeting with that organisation, going through an assessment centre. There's a lot to be read from the behaviours within the organisation as to whether that's one that pays attention to the staff voice, whether they're student focused, whether the culture feels like it would be one that they want to be part of. This is a big deal. When senior leaders consider new next moves, they're thinking of their next 3 to 5 years. So again, through coach support and working with them, we are always inquiring around their motivation, their appetite, their understanding of what a role potentially could be for them. And then you'll put a few practical things on it, like the remuneration package does become important. They want to know if it's been a fair paid position, and they want to get a sense from their own experience of what that communication and contact is like with that organisation, because that's a little glimmer of what they might be going to join. So there's all kinds of considerations. And there's something about where a leader is on their journey of growth and development. And so part of the work I do is assess readiness. And because I'm quite discerning in what I do, if I feel I've got leaders that aren't quite there yet, I don't encourage that they actually expose themselves to what could be not a great experience if they then get feedback that they've got gaps and they're not quite ready. But where you've got readiness kind of evidence through their professional journey, you can really align a potential match well to the complexion of an organisation, the level of position, and someone being in the right time, right place. And there's something to be said for that, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, back to me, next discussion point, Suzanne. And it kind of follows on again nicely from what you were talking about there, really. But I'm going to flip the perspective slightly. So from the candidate more to the board. And you've got unparalleled experience of making critical appointments, to very, very senior positions in the context that we're talking about. And I liked what you were saying earlier at the very start of this conversation, when you sort of alluded to the fact there's a lot invested in this, and just in money terms, I mean, I've been in various boards where I've reminded my colleagues around the table that if this person was to stay for 5 years, I want you to imagine that much cash on the table right now. So this is a big investment for all parties concerned. When you're talking about the sort of level of appointments that you're involved in making. And so to that end, when you think about these critical appointments, are there any themes that stand out to you in terms of common things that boards underestimate or maybe don't pay enough attention to in their initial brief they might talk to you about? Because I know you do a lot of guiding boards around how to sharpen their pencil, so to speak, around this is what perhaps you need to really focus on here for this role. Are there any common themes and the misconceptions about when boards come to you and appoint you and say, find us this top gun person, that you sort of have to guide them a little bit and coach them about?
There's an interesting thought about what boards think they want and what boards think they need, and that can be a contradiction and a conflict. So, and it's an interesting process. And then I'll also take the makeup of boards likewise. They bring multiple disciplines of expertise and different perspectives, and probably also a certain level of understanding around where an organisation is. So there's a lot of dynamics come to play. But what I regularly see is where the board and or the executive team are considering a senior appointment for what the candidate will get from them, because they rate themselves, they've got respect for what they're doing, they've got a clear understanding where they are, but they forget to sell what they are. So that two-way process isn't actually always recognised, that not only is a candidate presenting themselves to be a credible, visionary, prospective senior leader for them, but the college needs to actually sell themselves a little bit, kind of like, this is why it could be great to come and join us kind of thing. So there's a little bit of a reminder needed on the, and actually when we take briefs from our clients, we do that, what's your unique selling point? What's going to be the initial focus in that first year? What does success look like for this appointment a year from when they've joined you? And it really aligns their thinking and gets their checks and measures. And where that plays out really well is then when you're actually at that assessment centre day, you can remind the board what they were looking for. You can remind the board of what that 1 year success looks like. And it can keep them from astray towards the brilliant interviewer who's got a great, narrative to put forward and can perform brilliantly on the day, but might be 3 things away from what that board were looking for. So there's something in the process which helps them keep on track, and that's quite important. But there's also something interesting I observe, and it's been a characteristic for, I'm going to probably say decades, It's where as a sector we've got a bit of a reluctant view to take people from out of sector. And whilst I kind of get it, I get it from if you come with FE, let's take FE, for FE currency, FE knowledge, experience, you understand the landscape. It's very attractive. You can hit the ground running. But I do think there's some value to consider the contrasting experiences from a different point of view if you're considering people out of sector. And that can be a sticking point. And that's where I think process is difficult to actually, it goes to the want and the need. They want the person who can hit the ground running that understands the sector, but they might actually need an external and different perspective.
Yeah. Something you've mentioned actually, Jamie, isn't it, that about people tend to get into their lines and stay there, and that can be restricting sometimes. And I know you've said, Jamie, haven't you, that some diversity is needed within an organisation, and that could, lead in very well into what Suzanne was just saying.
Well, again, I'm going to use you as an example, Chris. So for anybody listening, when Chris joined us about, was it 20, 30 years ago now, Chris?
Feels like it, yeah.
When Chris joined us a few years ago, he came to me one night, came over to my place and said, I'm a bit concerned about joining because I might let people down. And I've never worked in tech before because Chris was helping to run a printing firm at the time. And I knew that wasn't going to be a problem for the exact point that you guys are making right now, which is that cross-sector disciplinary perspective sometimes can enrich and enhance the impact that individual can have in so many ways, actually. It's not to say it's inherently good or bad as a concept, but I do think it has a place. And sometimes a candidate from a totally different sector might be exactly what you're looking for. So yeah, it's an interesting point there. Yeah, is it your question next, Chris? I think
it's mine. Don't worry, I'll keep. If it's yours, I'll point to you, Jamie. Don't worry. I'm like his secretary sometimes. Just on, I know we've mentioned it previously. The importance of emotional intelligence. We've mentioned this, earlier in the conversation. What role does that play compared to, say, traditional experience or maybe just qualifications in a leadership role?
No, you're going for a topic which goes to my experience and where my heart lies on emotional intelligence. I've been a practitioner and licensed to assess people like Jamie and other leaders for 20 years. So
yeah, Chris is smiling because he's thinking, and he still made it through.
Yeah, but Chris,
I'm worried about the other candidates. That's what I'm concerned about. If Jamie got the job. No, joking, of course.
No, there's probably a conversation offline about Jamie's few heads, but getting back to the point, emotional intelligence for me, some of the most successful leaders are those for which they have high levels of emotional intelligence. And there is a simplistic understanding around what does that even mean. And it really is quite simple, because it's about someone's ability to understand their own emotions and those of another, and to know how and when to use those well. But when I see emotionally intelligent leaders who are aware of those competencies for which they have, what they have got a proven ability to do is to build trust, to coach, develop, and to handle situations with, there's a new trait coming through our sector, and that's calmness. And I'm not going to underestimate how important this is, because if you imagine any given situation, if you've got a calm leader and a chaotic leader and how they respond to something, I know which one you'll find more persuasive and more influential. So when I look to the traits that come through, again, self-awareness, the empathy, the receptiveness to recognize the emotional reactions from situations that are created and have to be responded to. Those that have got that innate ability to read well a situation will navigate a situation to calmness, to clarity, to progress. Whereas for those for which emotional intelligence is neither not there or not developed, or they don't recognize it, they can be clunky, they can cause misunderstandings, they can put their foot in it, they can make a situation worse. So there's a lot to be said for leadership development around people recognizing their own emotional literacy and those of another. And it's a whole conversation in itself. It's one I could talk at length at. But keeping it simple, it's about our emotional literacy and our emotional competences. And it's very powerful in any sector, any situation.
Yeah.
Certainly preaching to the converted here. 100.
Yeah, just jumping in there as well, Jamie. Yeah, empathy. That is definitely something you bring. And also Ian Nairn, our president as well. I've found that if I've had to approach anything, something that might not have gone quite right, or something I feel that's not, sort of going the way I expected it to, yeah, that conversation, that empathy, talking, just having a conversation and working out the best route forward is one of your best attributes, I'd say, Jamie.
Yeah, we were only talking earlier, actually, in a team meeting, Suzanne, about one of the aspects of the culture of the people we have in this team, for example, in C Learning, is that I'm very proud of, and Chris typifies this amongst all of the colleagues that could be on this call, is the ownership they have and with regards to their job. Now, the flip side of that is that sometimes they can be their own worst critics because they have such a sense of ownership of what they're doing. Yeah. And, Chris, I'm sure you won't mind me using you as an example of this, because Chris has a tremendous ownership of what he's doing. And considering he manages literally thousands and thousands of transactions for millions of pounds worth of software for us, he makes incredibly few mistakes. But when he does, he's quite a harsh critic of himself. But just on your calmness approach that you mentioned there, Suzanne, my response to you, I think, at the time when you made a very rare mistake, Chris, was, is it going to kill us? To which you said, no. And I'm like, okay, then. And that's kind of the approach that we take, and I do think you're absolutely right, Suzanne. I mean, I could relate so much to what you were saying there, because very powerful insights yet again. And yeah, absolutely great stuff. I'm going to change the focus a little bit now.
Okay.
And my interest is in this next sort of question I've got for you, really, is thinking about aspirational leaders now who might be looking for developing their career. So they're looking for their next move, and I know you do an awful lot of coaching, and I know you're an absolutely outstanding coach for people in a range of contexts. But if you were coaching somebody about their next career move, sort of what advice would you give them in terms of helping them to focus on what that should be? And, you must see certain trends with that as well, I'd imagine, about how they think about that process in itself. I mean, does that make sense? Any thoughts?
Yeah, loads of thoughts. A good starting point is the why behind the consideration, a next move, if that's something that's quite, a specific thing they're thinking of. A good question I found works well with people considering their next move is something along the lines of, how might that move contribute to your longer term career aspirations? And the reason why I pose that question is to get them to consider the investment of the next 3 to 5 years, for that to be progressive and aligned to where it is they think they're going long term, and or as part of their ongoing progressive developmental journey. And it's about, what corner do you want to put yourself in? Do you want to specialize? Do you want to extend your portfolio of responsibilities? Are you purposely seeking out new and different experiences so that you then combine that to make a better, wider offer, because you're thinking you want to be a CEO in time? So there's a little bit about career aspiration. There's a little bit of planning. There's a little bit of readiness, whether they have self-assessed that they are ready for a next step. And ultimately, and I'm not surprised by this, but when I ask people to consider, how does that play out for your next 3 to 5 year investment in your time, energy, and application of profession, it can take them aback, because they probably haven't thought about that connectivity to long term, the readiness argument, and actually, is that really where they want to put themselves for the next 3 to 5 years? And I say, I've probably had conversations, and through coach and other, where they've come to a view that actually, no, that isn't the right move. That isn't the right organisation. Now isn't the right time, because it's very easy to be ambitious and want to jump high and quickly, but actually that can lead to a fall. And it's very quick and easy to get yourself going down a certain run, which ultimately is going to take you away from your career aspiration rather than actually complement and bring you closer to. So there's some why questions that certainly pan out in those coach conversations around career intention, career abilities, career aspiration.
Great advice again. Yeah, brilliant. Chris.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, we've mentioned in the conversation earlier about sort of fit. Just wondering your opinion on what that cultural alignment really sort of looks like in senior education appointments. Don't know if you can sort of, I know we've talked about it a little bit. Maybe you could just elaborate on that a little bit, Suzanne.
Yep. So this is magic language that we use frequently, regularly, without probably ever really unpicking what do we mean by fit. But it is common language. There is an alignment, but that alignment now is considered against culture, values, and behaviours. So this is where, on a two-way basis, both candidate and client are looking for, is there an alignment around our values? Do they resonate to the core of what somebody's about? And if so, what does that look like in terms of behaviours? And this is where, you know, I've got probably mixed views on the effectiveness of assessment centres, but I do know one thing for sure, is that you will learn a lot about each other from a two-way perspective through an assessment centre. We tend to do these now as one-day events, and it's the unchecked things you see around you which give you a sense of culture. And likewise with the candidates. And in fact, when I do coach prep with candidates, I tell them of the pitfalls they will easily fall into if they don't consider them, which is their own behaviours on a day where they're probably feeling tested and checked and observed and assessed to the hilt. But they've got to show their authentic self. They've got to be themselves. They can't pretend to be something that they're not. And they've got to be receptive and listening out to this two-way fit that on both sides of the table that we're considering. But to give it a more tangible, something to hang on to that's more tangible, is behaviours and values. And if you're true to those, you'll get a true sense of whether there's a likely fit. There's a little bit more about it in terms of, does this person bring what we need right now? So if you've got your turnaround college, you want somebody who's got a background in having grade improved through relentless kind of approaches, with hearts and minds approach to taking people with them on a journey to change and improve things. If you are a different organisation where you are already in a great space because you're already Ofsted good or outstanding and you're recognised for lots of things reputationally with success, then you might want your more creative, visionary, external player person because you've got other things that you want to pursue. So what do you need? And what are the values and the behaviours telling you? And then there is something unquestionable about having in-person time together. It's not as easy to do it virtual. It's not impossible, but there's something about spending time in person. I mean, the things I value the most on assessment centres or approaches to appointments is where you actually also take things more informally and you have informal discussions with the chief exec, with a prospective applicant, and you actually take some of the status of assessment centre out of it and you get to know someone a little bit. It's not rocket science. Actually.
You know what, Suzanne, I can if I didn't know that you'd worked with Jamie previously, I'd go, you've definitely worked with Jamie. Another one of Jamie's points is, don't underestimate the value of actually going out and grabbing a coffee with somebody that you've worked with, you know, for years. You know, right, you may talk to them all day long on a call, but actually that personal touch of going out and just sharing a coffee, you're a big advocate of that, aren't you, Jamie? And I can see true value in that as well.
100%, yeah, because people are not a job description, are they? They're a person.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think sometimes that gets a little bit lost with some of it. So I can't believe how fast this session has gone, by the way, which is a good sign, because you've been coming out with so much wisdom and insight, Suzanne. It's very generous of you to be so open and to share so many insights. It's very, very, very much appreciated. The penultimate question is from me, and then I will wrap us up for the day. But the penultimate question from me really relates to diversity and the process that it plays in your thinking about candidates and the recruitment process. This is something that goes close to my heart, actually, because, which is somewhat ironic, because here I am saying that I'm sort of passionate about diversity as a white middle-aged chairman of a tech company, male, you know, I mean, the world does not need more of those. And when I go to tech events, for example, which I'm often at, I'm often dismayed, to be honest, where if you take away the really big companies like the Googles of this world, who are as diverse as it's possible to be. I mean, they are like a poster for diversity and getting it right. If you take that away and go to the layers below, like all the small to medium-sized companies like mine, I mean, I'm very proud to say we are a fully diverse company in C-Learning, and I'm really proud of that, because we've had to force it. We've had to go, you know, we really have had to consciously work at that, because if you advertise a job in the tech sector, for lots of complex reasons we won't go into maybe today, you don't tend to get necessarily a diversity of candidates that you're always aiming for necessarily. And I know that there's a skill involved in that, and there's lots of other things involved in that. But what process does these sort of issues or themes play in the work that you do around building very high performance senior teams and senior individuals within teams? How do you think about diversity in that process?
Well, I think there's been a really positive shift over possibly, I'd like to think probably a decade or two actually, where we've gone away from policy thinking, checks and measures around ED&I, that kind of thing. And we've now actually got a more genuine, more active approach and desire to want to have inclusive and diverse senior leadership teams. That said, whilst we've actually made a lot of inroads, certainly in the sector I'm talking about, from a gender perspective, we've now redressed the balance quite nicely of having a much higher proportion of senior women that equals that of male in senior positions. Where we have got a lot more to do is around ethnicity. So we have not got a reflective proportion of senior leaders from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds, despite certainly in my experience, boards and exec teams being very diverse aware and very diverse receptive to want to redress that representation. And interestingly, in a thought piece recently with the Black Leadership Group, for which I've got an affiliation with, we've been exploring that actually there's something about the Black ethnic minority applicants who have got a perception that they won't be as successful in application as other white applicants, for example. So there's something to be done here around supporting our Black and ethnic minority leaders progress and have that confidence in that they would be receptively considered. And I think certainly when we work with boards, we go straight to what's the cohort of your representation in boards and in exec teams, and we target applicants from Black and ethnic minority groups and encourage their interest, their motivation, their application. But I am going to say we've got a lot more to be done on that side of things, but it's a more considered element than it was in my earlier parts of the career.
Yeah, I echo that, and I agree with you that I think there's still a lot to be done. I suppose sounds a little bit negative, but I'm a little bit dismayed at how much there is still to be done, actually, because it's very easy to exist in a sort of privileged bubble of where you think everybody's diverse in the teams that they build, but it just isn't the case if you look objectively at the world out there.
Not at all.
And even things like age, by the way, for example, as well. I mean, most of the boards I'm on, the average age, well, let's put it this way, I'm the youngest, which is not a good thing. I'm saying that as a bad thing. So I think there is a lot to be done there. And just for anybody who's listening to this as well, by the way, who might be mistaken by thinking that some of the themes we're talking about here are sort of tokenistic or nice to have things that don't actually necessarily relate to the bottom line. That is a complete fallacy. There's lots of research out there that anyone can look at. For example, I was reading one very in-depth report by PwC that shows the more diverse your senior leadership team is, the higher performing the organization is. And they actually put pounds on it. I mean, in the case of a commercial business, it was something like 14%, I think, added to the net profit of the business. Absolutely. And so even if you're just concerned about money and you're not particularly concerned about some of the other topics we've been talking about, this still makes sense because the more diverse you are, the stronger your organization is.
Which is a really strong business case. There's an ethical issue, there's a moral issue, but there's actually a really strong business case.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree totally. I'm going to hand to Chris to ask the final question, which is a good one, and then it'll fall to me to wrap things up today. But Chris, I'll give you the honor of asking Suzanne the final question today.
Thanks. You actually got quite lucky here, Suzanne, because the final questions usually are right stinker. It'll be something like, what's going to happen? What's the most important thing in education in 5 years' time? And we will be checking in. And things like, so people go, oh my God, I don't know what to say. Yours isn't, I think yours is, I think Jamie's been kind to you. If you could give a message to any aspiring leader listening to this today about shaping their future career, what would be the one point? What would be the one thing you would say to them as your golden nugget of advice?
There's lots I would want to say here, but do you know what? I'm going to hone it down to the one thing that I find is failing applicants at times, and it goes to having that authentic narrative of a leadership style. I mean, come on, this isn't hard. We all know our values, we know how we behave, we know how we can have impact, but work that out as a narrative, and work it out in such a way that you own it, that it describes you authentically, that you are unapologetic and unhesitant in your delivery. Because if I kid you not, for want of many interviewing experiences, if I could count how many times someone's been asked, just talk me through what your leadership style looks and feels like, I get this faltering, unclear, lack of succinct articulation of their leadership style. And that's all I want to hear, because that's what you need to have as a narrative. You need to own it, be authentic, and be able to deliver that with a compelling conviction that says to somebody, well, that's what we would be getting. That's what they would bring to here. And it's not hard to do. And look, for completeness, let me just mention AI very briefly in the context of recruitment, because I think it's catching on that people are doing exactly, Jamie, what you opened up to say, 40 great applicants, 50 great applicants, whatever it was. There is a use, I think, of artificial intelligence in honing in your own narrative and your own support statement. But I would encourage anyone, you have to start with your own input. Content comes from you because you know you. You can get Chat GPT, AI to refine, make more succinct, and have checks and measures about what message is my narrative giving. But let it come from you first, because if you just put something in, you could be straying massively away from who you are, what you are, and then that's a missell. That's not going to work for you in any leadership scenario. So whatever you do with AI, start here and then get it to just polish it up for you.
What a fabulous statement to end on. That's been absolutely wonderful. Now, before I just formally wrap it up, I suspect this will be shared with a very wide audience as a thought leadership article afterwards. And that tends to go to like many thousands of very, very senior decision makers in a number of sectors, including education. If any of those leaders, having listened to this today, as I suspect they will do, they'll probably want to know, how do I get in touch with Suzanne to ask her a little bit of consultation and advice and guidance and support? What's the best way for anybody to get through to you, Suzanne?
Well, LinkedIn is a sure winner. Anyone can DM me through LinkedIn. Okay. But also I regularly post around my coach support. So I've got a dedicated contact for my coach support, kind of a contact, but the safety way, LinkedIn works. Anyone can find me on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Well, look, on behalf of Chris, myself, all of us at Sea Learning, I want to say a massive thank you to you for giving up some time today to talk to us, Suzanne. The insights have been amazing. I'm sure you agree, Chris. And there's some amazing quotes that I'm sure the team, I can already picture it, the team are going to pull some lovely quotes that you said during this conversation and highlight those in an article that we'll share publicly in a couple of weeks' time. But it's been absolutely wonderful and a huge privilege as always to catch up, Suzanne. Really do appreciate it. And thank you.
That's no worries. Can I just, for completeness, ask one question though?
You can.
Well, why was there no mention of aliens?
And for an explanation on what that's about, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can direct message me anytime. I was going to end this. By the way, I was going to end this before I actually do properly end it by saying, on behalf of Chris and myself, this was all a bit of a setup, just so as we could get some really good advice on how to get our next job.
Yeah, well, I hope you don't lose Chris as a result of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I was going to say, I'll be in touch with you.
You know how to get hold of me, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
LinkedIn,
yeah.
I'm there.
Yeah, but thankfully, I put a 10-year notice period on his contract.
I know how to get out of that as well.
and Suzanne does. It's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you again. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Leave you there.